Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth Sunday of Lent. Corinne and I have recording this on Sunday night again, and we thank you for all those who have been viewing the post. We hope it's helped you and been a nice addition for your Lenten journey. We've certainly enjoyed taking the time to record amongst barking dogs, opening and closing doors, and all the background noise that comes with family life. So we call to mind now this space that we find ourselves in, and enter it with a little bit of reflective music just for the next couple of minutes. If you find it helpful to take a couple of deep breaths, I certainly do. Just helps me slow down from the day's activities and just center myself in this prayerful space. Let us call to mind God's presence within and among us, today and always.
You who are over us, you who are one of us, you who are. Give us a pure heart that we may see you, a humble heart that we may hear you, a heart of love that we may serve you, a heart of faith that we may abide in you. Amen.
Amen. We're now going to read the Gospel for this week twice, nice and slowly, allowing those words to wash over us. Perhaps we can see ourselves in this Gospel. Where would we be? I'll read it first and then Corinne will read it our second time. And see if there's a word or a phrase that speaks to you as well. The Gospel according to John. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At daybreak, he appeared in the temple again. And as all the people came to him, he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and Pharisees brought a woman along who had been caught committing adultery, and making her stand there in full view of everybody, they said to Jesus, "Master, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery, and Moses has ordered us in the law to condemn women like this to death by stoning. What have you to say?" They asked him this as a test, looking for something to use against him. But Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. As they persisted with their question, he looked up and said, "If there is one of you who has not sinned, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Then he bent down and wrote on the ground again. When they heard this, they went away one by one, beginning with the eldest, until Jesus was left alone with the woman, who remained standing there. He looked up and said, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she replied. "Neither do I condemn you." And Jesus said, "Go away and do not sin any more." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
We'll just take a minute just to let those words sink into us.
Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At daybreak, he appeared in the temple again. And as all the people came to him, he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and Pharisees brought a woman along who had been caught committing adultery, and making her stand there in full view of everybody, they said to Jesus, "Master, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery, and Moses has ordered us in the law to condemn women like this to death by stoning. What have you to say?" They asked him this as a test, looking for something to use against him. But Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. they persisted with their question, he looked up and said, "If there is one of you who has not sinned, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Then he bent down and wrote on the ground again. When they heard this, they went away one by one, beginning with the eldest, until Jesus was left alone with the woman who remained standing there. He looked up and said, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she replied. "Neither do I condemn you," said Jesus. "Go away and do not sin any more." The Gospel of the Lord.
Just take a minute again to reflect on those words. Today, before we listen to Mother Hilda's spiritual direction, I thought we might do something a little different and add in a reflection by Father Anthony Jukes, who wrote on this gospel that may be worthwhile listening to today. So we'll listen to this before we listen to Mother Hilda's spiritual direction.
In our Gospel, a woman is caught in the very act of committing adultery. She is dragged before Jesus by the scribes and Pharisees and is humiliated, made to stand in full view of everybody. We don't know her name. We don't know anything else about her, but we do know she is in serious trouble. Her life is in danger because according to the law, anyone caught committing adultery was to be stoned to death. In fact, according to the law, the person she was caught committing adultery with was also meant to be stoned to death. But there is no mention of the man. Perhaps he escaped, or perhaps a trap had been deliberately set to catch the woman, so that she might be used as bait to test Jesus' own commitment to the law. Either way, the woman is in a desperate situation. To make matters worse, according to the law, only 2 witnesses were needed to convict a person and have them sentenced to death. The woman never had 2 witnesses. She had an entire bunch of self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, the law interpreters and the religious leaders of the day, pointing an accusing finger at her. Jesus is also in a serious situation. He knows the law given by God through Moses. He taught the 10 Commandments to others. In his Sermon on the Mount, not only did Jesus defend the law, but he raised it to a new and higher level. So, if Jesus defends the woman, he could be accused of denying the law and contradicting himself, losing all credibility. If Jesus agrees with the law and with the punishment prescribed in the law, Jesus is partly responsible for the death of the woman. But when questioned by the scribes and Pharisees, Jesus responds by saying nothing. He says absolutely nothing. In fact, Jesus doesn't even bother to look up. Instead, he bends down and writes with his finger on the ground. We have no idea what Jesus was writing. One suggestion is that Jesus was writing a list of sins, a reminder to the crowd that no one is free from guilt, and therefore no one in the crowd had the right to condemn the woman. Personally, I don't think Jesus was writing anything. I think he was making a really powerful gesture, scribbling on the ground to make a point. By pointing his finger into the ground, Jesus refuses to point the finger of blame at the woman. He doesn't deny the law. He just refuses to point the finger of blame. He refuses to have anything to do with the self-righteous crowd who are out to destroy not just the reputation of another person, but the very life of another person. Likewise, we must be careful not to gossip or point the finger of blame, lest we become part of the self-righteous crowd of scribes and Pharisees who take pleasure in ruining the lives and reputation of others. When Jesus does eventually respond, he looks up and says, "If there is one of you who has not sinned, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Jesus is without sin. He could have thrown the first stone. He could have pointed the finger of blame, but he doesn't. Instead, he bends down once more and continues to write with his finger on the ground. Jesus does not deny or change the law. He does not deny the reality of sin. He doesn't change the definition of what is right and wrong. After all, he tells the woman not to sin again. But at the same time, Jesus refuses to condemn. He refuses to point the finger of blame. He speaks the truth, but always with compassion.
There you go, something a little bit different for this week. For those who've been regularly following, consider it a little surprise. Now we'll listen to what we do every week and listen to Mother Hilda.
Who doesn't like this story? Perhaps some of you have seen the film The Stoning of Soraya M. It is the account based on a true story of a woman who gets stoned for adultery in a remote village. The viewer is privy to the whole story, and it is clear from the outset that this is an innocent woman. We are taken down the roads of Zoraya's own largeness of heart and intelligence, of the prejudice on the part of her jealous neighbours, the sheer corruptness of the corporate administration in the village, the blindness and uncaringness of her father, the confusion of her sons, the terror of her little daughters, the ignorance of the misguided mob who allow themselves to be led unthinkingly, the weakness and vulnerability of the widower who is forced to make a false confession to save his disabled son, the selfishness of Soraya's husband, and the heroism and loyalty of her aunt, who offers herself in Soraya's place. We are drawn into the tears shed by the journalist who receives this story from Soraya's aunt the day after. Throughout the film, we keep hoping that a Jesus-like character will come along and save her. Perhaps you know what it is like to have been falsely accused. Perhaps you know what it's like to accuse another on solid or hearsay evidence, even if you only do so in your own mind and heart. Perhaps you've gone along with something in order to save your own skin. Perhaps you have seen injustice and kept quiet, preferring to be accepted by the world at large rather than stand apart in truth. This story calls us to acknowledge our own failures and break the pattern of blame, as Jesus did. Notice how he affected the situation that day. He didn't accuse, he didn't eyeball anyone, he didn't give them the cold look of steel we so often effectively visit on people. He didn't drag out the dirt on them that he perhaps could have. He acted as though it was all up to them, as indeed it was. This story is not only about the poor woman, it is about the people in the crowd, the potential stone throwers. It wasn't until they were able to see themselves in their own sinfulness and human fragility that the situation changed, and Jesus gave them time to do that. One learns a great deal from dealing with children. If there is something truly important that they need to take on or experience, the best way is to minimise things. If the adult makes it too overwhelming, then the child can't take it on board. Instead, a good way is to give the impression that the matter in hand is everyday, nothing out of the ordinary, and even sometimes to pretend that we are no longer paying attention. I read a saying once, "I am most myself when no one is looking." Servant of God Dorothy Day, 1897 to 1980, hopefully to be beatified shortly, once said, "The older I get, the more I meet people, the more convinced I am that we must work on ourselves to grow in grace. The only thing we can do about other people is to love them." That's what God says too about the woman and us.
Always insightful, Mother Hilda's reflections, always insightful. So we have two following questions to reflect on, not just now, but maybe throughout the week. And the first one, what was effective about the way Jesus responded to the scribes and Pharisees? How does that impact our understanding of how Jesus might treat us in our sinfulness? So let me say that one more time. What was effective about the way Jesus responded to the scribes and the Pharisees? And how does that impact our understanding of how Jesus might treat us in our sinfulness? And the next question,
The scribes and Pharisees act in a self-righteous way, pointing their fingers in condemnation of the woman. How can we lead by example, showing compassion and mercy to those around us? The scribes and Pharisees act in a self-righteous way, pointing their fingers in condemnation of the woman. How can we lead by example, showing compassion and mercy to those around us?
A couple of questions to sit with for this week. And we now find ourselves at our closing prayer, and maybe we'll just read a paragraph each. O God, whenever I think of your infinity, I am raked with anxiety, wondering how you are disposed to me.
You must adapt your word to my smallness, so that it can enter into this tiny dwelling of my finiteness, the only dwelling in which I live, without destroying it.
If you should speak such an abbreviated word, which would not say everything, but only something simple which I could grasp, then I could breathe freely again.
You must make your own some human word, for that is the only kind I can comprehend.
Don't tell me everything that you are. Don't tell me of your infinity. Just say that you love me. Just tell me of your goodness. Amen. Pray by Father Carl Rana. Amen. And so pray blessing over you for this coming week. Next week we begin with Holy Week with Palm Sunday next Sunday. So until we see you next Sunday evening, have a beautiful and blessed week. Good night.
Good night.